Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Today we're going to start Chapter 11. As I mentioned in my previous video, here on out, less of the material actually applies to the tabletop. This particular chapter is called The 9 Situations, and really most of it has to deal with basically strategy. For example, in the beginning he talks about different types of ground. You know, if you're fighting in your own territory where your men are closer to their homes, it's not as good for you because they're more likely to leave worried about their families, whatever. If you get into just across the border in your opponent's territory, it's a little better. You still got still a little close to your stuff. You're not actually threatening the opponent significantly, and of course it just keeps going the further in you go. A lot of that has to do more with campaigns and things. So we're going to actually skip through basically the first 14 sentences, and we're going to start with sentence number 15. And we're only going to cover 3 today, but these actually do apply on the tabletop pretty well. So let's see what we can glean from these 3 sentences. All right? Okay. All right. Those who were called skillful leaders of old knew how to drive a wedge between the enemy's front and rear, to prevent cooperation between his large and small divisions, to hinder the good troops from rescuing the bad, and the officers from rallying their men. When the enemy's men were united, they managed to keep them in disorder. When it was to their advantage, they made a forward move. When otherwise, they stood still or stopped still. Now, very simple. He's talking about the older generals and their ability to do 2 things. One is disrupt the opponent, and one is to move and take advantages only when they needed to. Okay. There's an element of restraint there. So let's just go through the first 2. We'll take 15 and 16 together because it's really one concept in 2 sentences. Now here, he's talking literally about physically dividing the opponent's army. And he's discussing mostly, front and back, the commander from his front troops. Because even then you had your frontline men, you had reserves in back, which is where the general would be. Then you had supporting units on the flanks and what have you. So if you got your army between those 2, front and rear, orders were not going to be able to be issued between the 2 groups, except by flags and basically loud noises of some sort, whether it was trumpets or whether it was gunshots of some sort. That makes it more difficult for the enemy to function effectively, right? It also keeps the more experienced troops, which are supposed to be kind of out in front, away from the more experienced. Now, looking at this on the tabletop, we can actually apply this fairly straightforwardly, but it takes some observational practice. You really need to be able to identify how the opponent's army actually works. Because here, what we are trying to do is divide up the army so that they really can't coordinate with each other. Some systems, game systems, actually utilize mechanics where a leader exerts an influence on certain units around him within a certain range. Where you have something like that, if you can insert your units, even a small force, between that leader and the unit that he's trying to influence, and drive them further apart, eventually that unit will be out of command range, I'll call it, and they won't get the buffs from the commander, right? That's important. If there's another, this can apply to activating, because some systems, the leader and a certain number around them can activate at once. Other times it's a leadership kind of thing where the one unit has to be given orders to do something from the leader, or benefit from a buff by being within a certain distance. And, these are the things that you're trying to interfere with. Similarly, if you can find places within the opponent's organization on the table where you can interfere with the movement of units from one portion to the other. For example, if you were able to get behind them with enough of a screen to prevent units that are coming in from reserve to be able to quickly join with the units in the main body, you've disrupted them. Okay, that's going to cause trouble. That's going to be a challenge he's going to have to overcome. Yes, your unit might get eaten up pretty well, but you have prevented them and delayed them from becoming effective, right? That's an important consideration. In other ways, maybe you have a strong unit. Let's say it's a cavalry unit or something that can move fast and it's got a really good ability to attack, like on a charge or what have you. And it's off to one side, dealing with whatever it's supposed to be dealing with over there. And you're threatening and dealing with this part of the opponent's army you're doing your job, you're doing well. The opponent's going to want to take the cavalry unit and charge you. Well, that way relieving pressure on their own units. If you can insert one of your units or multiple units between that combat and that cavalry, that rescuing unit, you prevent them from being able to salvage the situation. These are the kind of things that Sun Tzu's talking about in this particular case. Being aware of how you can physically interrupt the movement of your enemy's troops, the facility of your enemy's commands between units or whatever. That's really what you're trying to accomplish here. Okay? So, relatively straightforward. It's pretty simple. Might take a little bit of imagination to actually pull that out, though. Now, sentence 17, this is very subtle, but it's when it was to their advantage, they made a forward move. When otherwise, they stopped still. Okay? The idea there being, don't needlessly move. Don't waste your energy if you don't need to. If there's no advantage in you taking an action, don't do it. Now, on the tabletop, the mechanics of most games don't really get affected by whether you move or not, right? As far as getting benefits. Okay. So you're looking more at the situation. Okay, do you take a unit and actually move forward instead of staying where you are and maybe engaging in long-range fire? If there's an advantage, you should do it. If not, stay put. Don't simply move for movement's sake. Don't reposition if there's no real benefit. Okay. When there is no benefit, hold your positions. Now, if there's something coming your way, let's say artillery could be coming down, you may have to move. Okay. Again, it's to your advantage to move, but don't do it without some prior thought. That's what he's trying to go for here. Now, again, this one little piece, it's a small sentence. It does apply to the tabletop. It probably doesn't have a huge impact, but if you can kind of capture the concept of being deliberate in your actions, moving only when it's to your advantage, not moving if it isn't, then I think you're going to start building a discipline, a self-discipline, so that you're able to then respond to what happens on the tabletop a little more calmly, more calculated, almost a cold way, okay? If you move your unit when there's no purpose, no reason to, you may actually put yourself out of position to affect the game later, simply because now you're too far away from what a real threat would develop. So it's also important to consider these things so that you don't accidentally fall into your opponent's trap. Evaluate those advantages. Make sure that the advantage you think you're going to get really is there and it's not something the opponent is kind of deceiving you with. So it's a concept. I think there has some practical application, but it's something we really need to think about more in terms of your own personal discipline in controlling your movements. And I won't call it being reserved, because you need to act with haste when it's appropriate, but you don't want to recklessly be moving and have no real point in your actions. Okay, so that's what we kind of read through in these 3 sentences. So we'll pause it here, and we'll revisit the next sentence later. It's a slightly different topic, so I didn't want to kind of muddy them together and just make a longer video. Again, Sun Tzu is succinct. I'm going to try to be succinct in these videos. So it's relatively short this week, but I think there's some things there to think about. All right? Go ahead and comment below if you haven't already. Share, like, subscribe. Click that bell icon. Get notified when these come out. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.